Hello everyone. Welcome to BYK Book Summary. I am Amin. Here we decode the inspiring journey, mental warfare, and empire building life lesson of the world's greatest legend. Today topics and their biggest secret are right on your screen. Let's dive in with my AI co-host.
So picture this. You sit down with a financial advisor, right? Or maybe just open up one of those little retirement calculator apps on your phone.
Oh, yeah. Everybody has one of those, right?
And you punch in your current savings, your monthly contribution, whatever, and the app spits out this neat, smooth, perfectly upward trending line.
A beautiful straight line.
Exactly. It projects this reliable, 7% annualized return for the next 30 years. And you look at that line, and it feels like physics.
Right. It's just a law of nature.
Yeah. You build your 10-year plans around it. You anchor your anxiety to it.
Yeah.
But then you zoom out and look at the actual architecture of the 21st century.
Right. The real world.
The real world. September 11th. The catastrophic global financial meltdown in 2008. The sudden total lockdown of the entire global economy during COVID.
The overnight explosion of generative AI rewriting the labor market.
Exactly. None of those events were on that smooth little chart. None of them.
Not a single one.
Those events didn't just, alter the trajectory of the line. They completely dismantled the axes of the graph itself.
They burn the graph to the ground.
Right. But the crazy thing is, the very next day, the experts go right back to drawing straight lines.
It's the ultimate illusion of control. I mean, we are navigating this hyper-complex universe using maps drawn for a completely different reality.
Which is wild.
It is. And the paradox of modern society is that as our statistical models have gotten more sophisticated, our vulnerability to absolute chaos has actually grown exponentially.
Like we're building taller houses of cards.
Precisely. The systems we rely on, global supply chains, algorithmic financial markets, geopolitical forecasting, they are all engineered for a predictable world that simply does not exist.
And that contradiction right there is the engine of our deep dive today.
Let's get into it.
We are pulling apart Nassim foundational framework from his book, The Black Swan.
Such a crucial text.
Truly. And the goal here isn't just, a basic summary. We are fundamentally dismantling the presumed predictability of modern finance, economics, and, honestly, your own personal life planning.
We want to rip out that flawed operating system.
Yes. The one that tells you the future can be neatly modeled. And we want to replace it with a framework actually designed for an inherently chaotic universe.
Because when you strip away all the Wall Street jargon, you're left with this terrifying reality.
Which is?
Our smartest institutions, armed with supercomputers and thousands of PhDs, are constantly structurally blindsided whenever the world inevitably flips upside down.
So the question is why? Why are the architects of our systems completely blind to the forces that actually shape history?
Well, to understand that blindness, you first have to understand the specific anatomy of the unknowable. You have to grasp the epistemological void at the center of how we process information.
Right, and we should define the term itself because Black Swan gets thrown around a lot.
It does. People use it as a catch-all phrase for, bad luck or a rare coincidence. But it defines a very specific rupture in the fabric of knowledge.
And it comes from a literal historical event.
Yeah. The etymology is fascinating. For centuries, Europeans confidently believed, as a matter of absolute empirical fact, that all swans were white.
Because every swan they had ever seen in all of recorded European history was white.
Exactly. Massive amounts of data confirming this fact. But then they sail to Australia and they see a single black swan.
Boom. Centuries of established truth destroyed in an instant by one single observation.
Right. But that historical metaphor is just the starting point. Taleb outlines 3 very specific mathematical and psychological criteria for these events.
Okay, let's break those down for the listener. What actually elevates a mere surprise to the level of a structural black swan?
Okay, first, it has to be a statistical outlier of extreme magnitude, meaning it lies entirely outside the realm of regular expectations.
Because nothing in the past data points to it even being possible.
Exactly. Second, it carries massive disproportionate impact. It doesn't just disrupt a localized system, it forces a total paradigm shift.
Like the internet. Or the atomic bomb.
Precisely. And third, and this is the psychological trap, Human beings instantly rationalize the event after it occurs.
Oh, this is the craziest part.
We construct a narrative that makes it appear predictable in retrospect. We fundamentally refuse to accept the randomness of it.
So we basically trick ourselves into thinking we knew it was coming all along.
Yep. So if you put those three together, you realize the fundamental thesis here. Human history doesn't crawl forward through routine, predictable events.
It leaps.
It leaps and fractures. It is driven entirely by rare, extreme anomalies.
Okay, so if history is a series of massive, unpredictable fractures, studying the average day-to-day data is statistically useless.
Worse than useless. It's actively dangerous.
Which brings us to my absolute favorite analogy from the book, the Thanksgiving turkey.
Oh, it's brilliant.
It really is. So let's walk through this thought experiment. Consider the life of a turkey raised on a farm. Every single day, the farmer comes out and feeds the turkey.
Day 1, the turkey gets fed.
Day 50, the turkey gets fed. Day 200, the turkey gets fed. And if that turkey is, say, a modern Wall Street data scientist.
Oh, the turkey is building a massive spreadsheet.
Right. The turkey is plotting these observations on a chart. And the data is unequivocal.
The statistical model proves, with 100% historical accuracy, that human beings are fundamentally benevolent.
Yes. The turkey's confidence actually peaks on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Because the sample size is at its absolute largest.
Exactly. The statistical probability of being fed, based on a massive, rigorous data set, has never been higher. The turkey has literally zero empirical evidence to suggest danger.
And then Thursday arrives.
The butcher shows up.
Yeah. And to the butcher, this is a completely routine event. It's just Thursday.
But to the turkey?
To the turkey, it is a catastrophic, unimaginable black swan. Its entire understanding of reality goes to zero in a fraction of a second.
Well, wait, let me play devil's advocate here. Human beings aren't turkeys.
Sure we are.
I mean, we have petabytes of historical data, we have global sensors, sophisticated machine learning models mapping geopolitical movements. We aren't just blindly eating feed.
True.
So how does that analogy actually translate to, like, a Wall Street quant with a PhD from MIT or a central bank?
Well, the problem isn't the volume of data. The problem is the nature of induction itself. The turkey's fatal flaw was a total lack of epistemic humility.
Epistemic humility. Break that down.
It means knowing the limits of your own knowledge. The turkey committed the ultimate sin of data analysis. It assumed that the absence of evidence was evidence of absence.
Just because it had never seen the butcher didn't mean the butcher didn't exist.
Precisely. And in modern finance and economic forecasting, we do the exact same thing.
Give me an example.
Think about the housing market crash in 2007. When a risk model evaluated those subprime mortgages, it looked at the historical data and noted that a simultaneous nationwide collapse of real estate prices had never happened in the modern era.
So because there was no historical evidence of the event?
The model assigned it a probability of effectively zero.
Wow. They literally wrote the algorithm as if the butcher was a mathematical impossibility.
They optimized for a world without butchers. But history is just littered with silent risks. The cemetery of failed predictions is entirely populated by experts who built models based strictly on what they had observed in the past.
Leaving themselves completely structurally defenseless against what they had never seen.
Right. You cannot build a predictive model for an unprecedented event using historical data because the very definition of the event is that it has no historical precedent.
Okay, so if the core philosophy of looking at past data to predict extreme future events is fundamentally broken, why are trillions of dollars in global markets still managed this way?
That is the trillion-dollar question.
I mean, I understand the turkey analogy conceptually, but mechanically, how does a room full of Ivy League quants convince themselves they have mapped out the future?
They convince themselves because they are using mathematics that were designed for an entirely different universe.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
To understand the mechanical failure of modern finance, you have to understand the strict boundary between two very distinct domains of reality. Taleb categorizes them as mediocristan and extremistan.
Mediocristan and extremistan. Let's define the borders of those two worlds, because I suspect most of the algorithms running our lives think they live in the first one.
Oh, they absolutely do. So let's start with mediocristan. This is the realm of the physical, the biological, the thermodynamic.
Stuff bound by actual physical laws.
Exactly. In this domain, physical limits constrain the data. Outliers exist, sure, but they are physically bound and therefore cannot wildly distort the aggregate average.
Right. The classic illustration here is human height.
Yeah, let's use that. If you gather 1 million random people in a giant stadium and calculate their average height, you get a highly accurate representation of the population.
Makes sense.
Now, introduce the tallest human being in recorded medical history into that stadium. Add their height to the total pool and recalculate the average for the 1,000,001 people.
The needle barely twitches.
Oh.
I mean, the average height shifts by a fraction of a millimeter. The sheer mass of the collective easily absorbs that extreme outlier.
Precisely. In Mediocristan, the collective always dwarfs the individual. No single observation can meaningfully alter the total. Weight, caloric intake, running speed, mortality rates. These physical metrics live safely in Mediocristan.
And crucially, Mediocristan obeys the laws of the Gaussian distribution.
The classic bell curve.
Right. So if you are an insurance actuary dealing with human mortality, the bell curve is an incredibly powerful, accurate tool. You can perfectly price the life insurance policy because biological death operates in Mediocristan.
It does. A human being cannot live to be 10,000 years old. Physics prevents it.
So the math of the bell curve works perfectly when things are constrained by physics. But modern society, and certainly modern wealth, is completely uncoupled from physics.
Which brings us to the second domain, Extremistan.
Welcome to Extremistan.
Extremistan is the realm of the social, the informational, and the financial. Here, physical constraints simply do not exist. Information scales infinitely at zero marginal cost.
And in Extremistan, a single outlier doesn't just skew the data.
It dictates the entirety of the system.
Okay, let's return to that stadium analogy to really paint the picture.
Right, the stadium of 1 million random people. But this time, calculate their average net worth.
Okay.
Now, instead of the tallest person, you invite a multi-billionaire tech founder into the room, say Elon Musk or Bill Gates.
You just added a $200 billion net worth to the pool.
You add that single data point, and suddenly the average net worth of the people in that stadium skyrockets.
Mathematically, everyone in the room is now a multimillionaire on paper.
Exactly. One single individual completely obliterated the collective data of a million others. That is the fundamental definition of Extremistan.
It governs wealth distribution, book sales, venture capital returns, social media influence.
Corporate market caps, everything that can scale infinitely. You can have 10,000 authors selling 50 books a year, and one author sells 100 million.
Because there's no biological equivalent to that.
Mm-hmm.
A human being cannot be 10,000 times taller than another human being.
Right.
But a company can absolutely be 10,000 times more valuable than its competitor.
And here is the profound structural catastrophe of the global financial system.
Lay it on me.
The stock market, global supply chains, international currency markets, they live entirely, unequivocally in Extremistan. They are driven by power laws, winner-take-all dynamics, and contagious network effects.
Okay.
But traditional risk models, the actual algorithms used by major banks, hedge funds, and central banks, were built using Gaussian bell curve logic.
Wow.
They're using the mathematics of Mediocristan to measure the violent, boundless reality of Extremistan.
I have to challenge the sheer scale of that incompetence, though. Are you really telling me that the entire discipline of quantitative finance people building complex derivative pricing models, people managing sovereign wealth funds, are essentially trying to measure the volume of a hurricane with a plastic ruler?
That is exactly what they're doing.
But how can the global financial architecture be built on an arithmetic error of that magnitude? It sounds absurd.
Well, it is absurd, but it's not a simple arithmetic error. It is a willful blindness driven by mathematical elegance.
What does that mean?
The Gaussian bell curve is mathematically tractable. It's clean. You can put it into an elegant formula like the Black Scholes model for options pricing, and it spits out a precise, comforting number.
People like clean numbers.
Of course they do. But Extremistan, math fractal geometry, power law distributions is incredibly messy. It doesn't give you clean answers.
What does it tell you?
It tells you that the variance is infinite and that a market crash of unimaginable proportions could literally happen tomorrow.
And you can't sell a financial product if the prospectus says, hey, we have absolutely no idea what the risk actually is.
Exactly. You can't market that.
Yeah.
So the industry adopted models like value at risk, or VAR.
VAR.
Yes.
The infamous VAR.
Yes. VAR essentially attempts to quantify the maximum possible loss a portfolio could suffer over a given time frame, with, say, a 99% confidence interval.
Sounds great on paper.
But VAR assumes that market returns follow a normal bell curve distribution. It treats a financial market like a biological organism.
So it assumes extreme events are basically impossible.
It assumes that a market dropping 20% in a single afternoon is statistically akin to finding a human being who is 3 miles tall.
Which is ridiculous.
Completely. The model calculates the odds of a catastrophic crash as a 10 sigma event, something that theoretically shouldn't happen in the entire lifespan of the universe.
But those 10 sigma crashes happen literally every decade.
They do.
Black Monday in 1987. The long-term capital management collapse in 1998. The dot-com bust. The 2008 mortgage crisis. The 2020 pandemic flash crash. We see them all the time.
Because the models are categorically blind to fat tails.
Fat tails, right. Explain that for the listener.
In a bell curve, the tails, the extreme ends of the distribution, taper off to nothing very quickly. In Extremistan, the tails are fat. They contain the bulk of the impact.
So the extreme outliers aren't just possible, they dictate everything.
Exactly. The 2008 financial crisis was the ultimate collision between mediocristan models and an Extremistan reality. The quants looked at the collateralized debt obligations and calculated, using Gaussian math, that the risk of mass default was practically zero.
So they optimized their leverage to the absolute limit.
Believing the math protected them. And when the system broke, it didn't just break a little bit. It cascaded through the global network instantly because the map they were using had fundamentally denied the existence of the territory they were walking in.
Okay, this brings us to a massive psychological disconnect.
Oh, the psychology is the deepest part of this.
If the quants are continually blowing up the global economy, if value at risk is proven to be a catastrophic failure every 10 years, why does the public tolerate it?
It's a great question.
Why do central bankers still use these models? Why don't we just fire the forecasters and throw the bell curves in the trash?
We don't fire them because of a profound neurological glitch in the human brain. We possess a powerful biological defense mechanism against the terror of pure randomness. Taleb defines this as the narrative fallacy.
The narrative fallacy. This is where it gets really interesting.
Our brains are essentially pattern recognition machines, heavily addicted to dopamine. We physically cannot tolerate chaos. We hate it.
So when something random happens,
When an inexplicable, chaotic event occurs, our neurology forces us to impose a linear story over the randomness. We have to create a neat chain of cause and effect.
I always compare this to watching a highly complex mystery movie for the second time.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it.
Right. During the rewatch, the foreshadowing feels painfully, almost insultingly obvious. The camera lingers on a peculiar object in the first scene. A character makes a strange, offhand comment in the second act.
And you sit there going, how did I miss that?
Exactly. You sit on your couch thinking, how did I not see this coming? The clues were right in front of my face. But on the first watch, you were completely clueless. You were utterly blindsided by the twist ending.
That is a phenomenal representation of how we process history. We live life forward on the first watch, immersed in infinite variables, noise, and total chaos.
But we analyze history backward on the second watch.
The narrative fallacy is the process by which we actively filter out all the noise and irrelevant data after the fact, leaving only the data points that directly led to the event. We strip out the randomness and construct a clean, logical pathway.
Which is incredibly dangerous when applied to global events. Look at the post-mortem of the September 11th attacks.
A textbook example.
Before it happened, it was an unthinkable black swan. But the moment the towers fell, the narrative machine kicked in.
Intelligence analysts, journalists, historians, they all went backward through the archives.
They highlighted the flight school anomalies, the ignored memos, the geopolitical warnings, and suddenly the narrative solidified. The attack was obvious. The writing was on the wall.
We saw the exact same neurological reflex with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, 100%. Prior to the outbreak, no economic model or geopolitical forecast successfully predicted the specific timing, strain, and total global lockdown that occurred.
None of them. Yet within weeks, experts were appearing on television explaining the precise ecological, globalist, and biological mechanics that made a pandemic of that exact nature historically inevitable.
Wait, suddenly everyone's an expert on wet markets, international flight routes, supply chain vulnerabilities. It was suddenly a perfectly predictable event.
But only after the fact. So what is the actual danger of the narrative fallacy? If telling stories helps us sleep at night, why is it a problem?
Well, you tell me. Why shouldn't we comfort ourselves with stories?
The danger is that we mistake this retrospective clarity for genuine, forward-looking, predictive ability.
Ah, We think because we can explain the past, we can predict the future.
Exactly. By convincing ourselves that past chaos made logical sense, we delude ourselves into believing that future chaos can be modeled. We think we understand how the world works because we successfully narrated the last Black Swan.
So we build our institutional defenses, our financial regulations, our national security apparatus to fight the last war?
Yes. We build sophisticated Maginot lines to defend against the Black Swan we already experienced, leaving ourselves entirely exposed to the novel, unprecedented Black Swan of the future.
The one we haven't thought of yet.
Right. The narrative fallacy causes a chronic underestimation of future uncertainty. We treat life like we are on our second viewing of the movie, confident in our understanding of the plot, completely ignorant of the fact that the genre of the film is constantly changing.
Okay, so to summarize the sheer gravity of the problem we're facing here, we exist in a volatile, highly networked, extremist-and reality driven almost entirely by rare, high-impact black swans. Our financial models and economic projections are based on mediocre math that willfully ignores the possibility of these events.
Also correct?
And our own biological neurology actively lies to us, convincing us that the world is predictable by spinning fairy tales about the past.
It is a grim reality.
It is. So if you accept this, if you accept that the models are fake and the future is a void, how are you supposed to manage a portfolio? How do you invest a retirement account or build a career without just, I don't know, burying gold in the backyard and waiting for the apocalypse?
I know, it sounds paralyzing, but this is the pivot point from pure epistemological diagnosis to an actionable structural solution. Taleb does not advocate for nihilism or hiding from the world.
Okay, good. Because I don't want to bury gold.
You don't have to. He offers a specific architectural framework for navigating extremistan. It is called the barbell strategy.
The barbell strategy. I want to dig deep into the mechanics of this because it honestly flies in the face of everything retail investors are taught.
It's completely counterintuitive at first glance.
The blueprint of the barbell strategy is extreme polarization. Picture an actual weightlifting barbell. You have massive weights concentrated entirely on the two far ends of the bar, and the middle is completely hollow.
Right. Nothing in the middle.
So, applied to finance, Taleb suggests placing 90% of your assets in hyper-conservative, ultra-safe instruments.
We are talking about pure survival capital here. Treasury bills, insured cash, things that are categorically immune to a stock market collapse.
And then, you take the remaining 10% of your assets and place them on the absolute opposite end of the extreme risk spectrum.
You allocate that 10% to highly speculative, hyper-aggressive, asymmetric bets. Deep out-of-the-money options, early-stage angel investments, volatile digital assets, bets where the potential upside is essentially uncapped.
And capped upside. And the cardinal rule of this strategy, this is the part that blows my mind, is that you leave the middle entirely empty. You avoid moderate risk completely.
Yeah, shun the middle.
Now, I have to aggressively challenge this on behalf of every person who has ever owned a 401k.
Please do.
This strategy contradicts the holy grail of modern wealth building, the diversified 60-40 mutual fund. Every financial planner on earth tells you to buy a broad index fund, hold a mix of equities and bonds, and capture a moderate compound interest of 7 or 8% over 30 years.
The standard advice.
Are you seriously suggesting that the standard disciplined approach to retirement is fundamentally flawed? How does a retail investor justify earning zero yield on 90% of their money just out of fear of a black swan?
I am absolutely suggesting that the moderate risk portfolio is a profound illusion of safety that exposes you to total ruin.
Okay, defend that.
The problem with the 60-40 portfolio, or the broad index fund, is that it sits squarely in the middle of the barbell. It is entirely exposed to extremistan volatility, but its upside is strictly capped.
Meaning you can lose everything, but you can only win a little.
Exactly. If you own a broad S&P index fund, you might make 10% in a great year. But if a negative black swan hits a cascading global liquidity crisis, that moderate portfolio can lose 40, 50, or 60% of its value in a matter of weeks.
And mathematically, if you lose 50% of your portfolio, you need a 100% gain just to get back to where you started.
You are taking on catastrophic tail risk downside for a mediocre, capped upside. It is the financial equivalent of the turkey picking up pennies in front of an approaching steamroller.
Picking up pennies in front of the steamroller, that is a terrifying image.
But it's accurate. You feel safe because the pennies are consistent right up until the moment you are crushed. The barbell strategy is not about optimizing for maximum compound yield. It is about optimizing for structural survival.
Okay, let's walk through the math of asymmetry with the 90-10 split. If that steamroller hits, if a 2008 level crisis evaporates global equities overnight, what happens to the barbell investor?
You know, the 90% of your portfolio is in sovereign treasuries or cash. It does not drop.
It's totally insulated.
The worst absolute case scenario for your speculative 10% is that it goes to zero. Your angel investments fold. Your out-of-the-money options expire worthless. You lose 10% of your total net worth.
Which hurts, but
You survive. You are battered, perhaps, but you are completely structurally intact. You avoid ruin. And in investing, avoiding ruin is the only metric that truly matters, because if you are ruined, you cannot play the next hand.
But the strategy isn't just about playing defense, right? The genius of the barbell is what happens on the other side of the equation. What happens if one of those hyper-speculative bets in the 10% bucket actually catches a positive black swan?
This is where you harness the power of extremistan rather than being victimized by it. The 10% is allocated to bets with massive convexity.
Convexity.
Yes. If you invest in a garage startup or buy deeply discounted derivatives during a period of low volatility, your downside is strictly capped at the capital you invested.
The most you can lose is that small 10% chunk.
But your upside is potentially a 1000x multiplier. If one of those bets catches a technological or market black swan, it doesn't return 7%, it returns exponentially. It pulls the entire portfolio up with it.
So you completely abandon the hubris of prediction. You admit that you have absolutely no idea which direction the market is going, what the Fed will do, or what technology will win.
You surrender to the unknowable.
Instead of predicting the weather, you build an ark that can survive a flood, but you also put a massive sail on the roof just in case a hurricane decides to blow you straight to a gold mine.
That is the essence of it, beautifully put. You construct a portfolio that bleeds a little bit every day. You lose to inflation on the 90%. You take small, constant losses on the speculative 10% that don't pan out.
But you are structurally positioned to experience massive discontinuous gains while being permanently immune to catastrophic wipeouts.
Exactly.
But protecting a portfolio is only a subset of the human experience. Taleb's philosophy transcends capital allocation. He takes the concept of surviving chaos and scales it into a biological and existential framework.
This is my favorite part of his work.
How do we build a life that doesn't just cower from volatility, but actively consumes it? That brings us to the zenith of his philosophy, the concept of anti-fragility.
To understand anti-fragility, you must realize that survival is not the highest state of existence. Taleb maps out a triad, a spectrum of how different systems respond to stress, disorder, and time.
Okay, let's map the triad. At the absolute bottom of the spectrum, you have things that are fragile.
Right. Fragile systems despise volatility. They require total tranquility, predictability, in order to function. When a fragile system is subjected to a shock, a stressor, or a black swan, it takes damage or breaks entirely.
The definitive example here is a porcelain teacup.
Yes. If you drop a porcelain teacup on a hardwood floor, it shatters. It has zero capacity to absorb chaos.
Moving one step up the spectrum, we reach the middle ground, things that are robust or resilient.
Robust systems are indifferent to stress. They can absorb a shock, weather the storm, and maintain their structural integrity. But crucially, they do not change.
So a plastic cup dropped on that same hardwood floor?
Will bounce. It survives the shock, but it remains just a plastic cup. The stress did not improve it.
Which brings us to the top of the spectrum, the concept that requires a complete rewiring of how we view adversity. Anti-fragile.
Anti-fragile systems don't merely survive volatility, they actively require it. They grow stronger, more capable, and more complex because they are subjected to stress, shocks, and disorder.
The ultimate analogy for this is human muscle tissue.
Spot on.
A porcelain teacup shatters under pressure. A plastic cup survives pressure. But human muscle is fundamentally anti-fragile.
Think about what happens when you go to the gym.
Right. When you lift heavy weights, you are introducing acute physical stress and volatility into your biological system. You are literally causing micro-tears in the muscle fibers.
If you applied that kind of trauma to a fragile system, it would break completely.
But the biological response of the muscle is to overcompensate. It repairs the tears by building the tissue denser and stronger to ensure it can handle that exact stressor in the future.
Muscle requires the chaos of resistance to grow. Without stress, it atrophies.
And if you look closely, nearly all complex, enduring biological and ecological systems are antifragile.
Evolution by natural selection is the ultimate antifragile process. It relies on random genetic mutations, volatility, and the brutal stress of environmental pressure to cull the weak and forge stronger, highly adapted species. The system of life on Earth uses chaos as its primary engine of progress.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
But the tragedy is that while nature builds antifragile systems, modern humans have spent the last 300 years aggressively engineering antifragility out of our lives.
We have tried to sterilize our environment.
We optimize for maximum efficiency, maximum predictability, and zero friction. We hate the micro tiers.
And in doing so, we have built highly fragile artificial constructs. Think about the modern corporate career path.
Oh, this is a huge one.
For decades, the societal ideal was to graduate from university, join a massive corporation, and work there for 40 years, collecting a steady, predictable paycheck.
The gold watch at retirement.
Right. That is a highly fragile structure. You have a single source of income, heavily dependent on the decisions of middle management, macroeconomic cycles, and technological shifts.
You have engineered a life with a single point of failure.
Exactly. If an extremistan event occurs, a sudden AI breakthrough that automates your entire department, or a global pandemic that bankrupts your sector, your entire livelihood shatters like the porcelain teacup.
So how does an individual mathematically apply the barbell strategy to their own human capital? How do you make a career act like human muscle in the age of artificial intelligence?
You have to intentionally inject volatility and redundancy into your life. Efficiency is the enemy of anti-fragility. Redundancy is your armor.
Redundancy over efficiency. I like that.
To build an anti-fragile career, you apply the 90-10 barbell. Perhaps you maintain a stable, unglamorous day job that pays the rent and provides health insurance. That is your 90% survival base.
But you fiercely protect your evenings and weekends to cultivate the 10%.
You build a side business, you learn a radically divergent skill set, you build a massive network of contacts in completely disparate industries.
You are systematically acquiring what Taleb calls optionality.
Yes, the right, but not the obligation, to pivot when the board flips.
Optionality is the holy grail of anti-fragility. If you have only one highly specialized skill, you have zero options when the environment changes. You are fragile to the future.
But if you have diversified your income streams, cultivated a wide breadth of knowledge, and hoarded liquid savings, you possess asymmetric upside.
So when an economic crash hits, the fragile specialist is wiped out. But the anti-fragile generalist with cash and options looks at the crash not as a disaster, but as a generational opportunity to acquire cheap assets or rapidly pivot into a newly created vacuum.
You stop trying to perfectly predict which specific software language will dominate the next decade, and instead you build the cognitive flexibility to learn any language rapidly when the winner emerges.
You become the fire that is fueled by the wind rather than the candle that is extinguished by it.
That is the ultimate epistemological shift. If you truly accept that you cannot know the future, you stop expending calories trying to build the perfect predictive model. You shift your energy toward building a vehicle that can traverse any terrain.
Man, this has been such a massive journey. Let's synthesize this.
Let's do it.
We have systematically deconstructed the illusion of the smooth upward trending line. We have examined the anatomy of the Black Swan, the rare, massive anomalies that actually dictate the course of human history.
We've acknowledged the terrifying reality that our financial and societal architecture operates in the boundless winner-take-all realm of extremistan,
while relying on the comforting but fundamentally useless mathematics of mediocristan.
We've also confronted the enemy within, the narrative fallacy.
Our brain's desperate desire to spin neat, retroactive stories out of pure randomness, reminding ourselves that predicting the past offers absolutely zero protection for the future.
And we laid out the blueprints for survival, the barbell strategy for our capital-embracing extreme safety and hyper-speculation while violently rejecting the dangerous illusion of the middle ground.
And finally, the pursuit of anti-fragility, the intentional construction of a life, a career, and a mindset that requires volatility to grow, ensuring that when the inevitable chaos arrives, we don't just survive it, we harness it.
This is not abstract philosophy to be debated in some stuffy economic seminar. It is an urgent, highly practical lens for assessing every single decision you make.
It dictates how you should parse the morning news, how you should view debt, and how you design the architecture of your daily life in a world that is accelerating into deeper and deeper complexity.
Absolutely.
Which leaves us with a final provocative question to consider long after this deep dive ends. We have established that we live in Extremistan, where network effects allow single events to scale globally in an instant.
Right.
Think about the physical reality of the modern world. The internet, algorithmically driven social media, instantly synchronized global supply chains, instantaneous capital flight. We have networked the entire globe into a single, tightly wound nervous system.
And while connectivity brings immense efficiency, it mathematically accelerates the speed, scale, and virulence of black swans.
Right. A supply chain hiccup in a single port cascades into global shortages in days.
A bank run sparked by a single social media post evaporates billions of dollars in hours.
A novel pathogen travels from an isolated market to every major airport on Earth in weeks.
So the question is,
Does living a hyper-connected, deeply integrated, always-online life fundamentally guarantee your fragility? Are we individually plugging ourselves directly into the high-voltage grid of Extremistan?
it's a terrifying thought.
If the system itself is structurally vulnerable to instantaneous contagion, could the ultimate luxury of the future, the ultimate 90% anchor in your personal barbell strategy, be the deliberate, radical choice to disconnect?
Could isolating yourself from the rapid contagion of the digital network, aggressively cultivating local skills, building a hyper-local community,
Embracing a slower, less efficient, fundamentally disconnected life, could that be the only authentic way to forge anti-fragility in the 21st century?
it is the ultimate paradox of the modern age. To survive the apex of human networking, the optimal strategy might require you to systematically unplug from it.
Something to carefully weigh the next time you are doom scrolling, consuming the latest geopolitical narrative and trying to guess what the future holds. Stop trying to predict the storm.
Start building the ark.
Embrace the uncertainty, redesign your systems for chaos, and prepare accordingly.
So friends, that was the complete breakdown. Make sure to take a screenshot of this growth gift, this infographic, so this lesson stay with you. If you want to learn from legends every single day, join our community. I am Amin. Always remember, read more, think deeper. Let me know in the comments who we should cover next. See you in next episode.